Hi there everyone. If you've been following the channel for a while, you've probably heard of this. This is the AOS UL5 and it's my take on an ultralight 5-inch frame for freestyle flying. Now, I launched this frame a little while ago, and if you want to learn more about it, I'll put a link down in the video description. But I've been getting a lot of really positive feedback about this frame, about how it flies and how much people love the form factor and the weight. But I've also been getting some people requesting something slightly different for a different application. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because I have a new design that I want to share with you. So this is the AOS LR5, and it's similar to the UL5, but addresses a couple of key requests that I got from pilots who were flying the UL5, but wanted something a little bit different for long range flying. This frame has no props in view. It can hold a full-size DJI Air Unit, and it's got a slightly longer platform, so there's a little bit extra space to mount things like GPS and stuff like that for long-range flying. But don't be fooled, this isn't just a long-range frame. It's also an absolute riot to fly freestyle, and especially with no props in view, it gives a very immersive experience. So today I'm going to take you through this frame on the bench. I'm going to show you my build and hopefully give you all the information you need to see if this is the right frame for you. And if it is, you can actually order yours today from CNC Drones in a whole bunch of different colors, and it's going to be being made available through other channels as well very, very soon. So let's not waste any more time, let's get into it. So let's take a look at the AOS LR5 on the bench. And I'm going to start by flipping the drone over so we can take a look at the arm layout. Now the arm layout on the AOS LR5 is quite different from the other AOS frames that I've designed up until now. It's got a dead cat style motor layout. You can see that the front motors are wider apart and the rear motors closer together. And the reason that I've done this is it was the best way to keep the props out of view of the camera while still keeping the body of the quad really compact and keeping the weight of the quad down. Now, having a dead cat layout usually introduces some issues with flight performance. The first is that it's typically done by using shorter front arms and longer rear arms, and that tends to lower the resonant frequencies of the rear arms and make flight performance worse. You get more oscillation, more jello. Now, the way I've addressed this with the LR5 is that the front and rear arms are identical. They're exactly the same length, they're exactly the same part, and actually you can take a rear arm and use it as a front arm and vice versa. There's no difference between them at all. So that eliminates this problem with having a lower resonant frequency because of a longer rear arm. And in fact, this quad flies just as good as the UL5 with its X-shaped layout. So I'm really, really pleased with how that's turned out. And that required quite a bit of refinement of the geometry of the design based on some finite element simulations that I did. You can see that the structure of the frame is really similar to other AOS frames. We've got brace plates on the bottom of the quad, then the arms underneath the main plate, and then this main plate here. The electronics mounting on the AOS LR5 is really, really phenomenally flexible. So you can see here that I've got a 2-stack configuration set up with a 20x20 stack in the front and a Caddx Vista in the back. Now you can have a 20x20 or a 25x25mm stack in the front. And then in the back, you've got a whole range of options. You can have a 20x20 stack, a 25x25mm stack, or a 30x30 stack. So this means you can fit a Caddx Vista, you can fit a 25mm Whoop AIO, you can fit the new Avatar VTX, you can even fit the HD0 1W Freestyle VTX in the back here. So you have an enormous amount of space, and you can even fit a full-size 30x30 stack in the rear if you'd like, and put a Caddx Vista or something up front. If you decide that rather than having a 2-stack mounting, you would prefer a central stack position, for example if you're running an analog build, then you can do that too. There is both a 20x20 and a 25x25mm central stack position as well. But if you decide to use the central stack, I don't think you'll be able to use the front and rear stacks at the same time. So that's a trade-off. I would suggest that if you're going for an analog build, you can probably make use of that central stack, and if you're going for a digital build, you're probably going to go for a front and rear stack configuration. I think that's what's going to work best for you. If we flip the quad over, you can see that we have a top plate kind of similar to the UL5 in some respects, but obviously the geometry is different because of the new arm layout. We have a 32 by 32 millimeter GoPro mounting in the front, so you can put a GoPro up front there if you want to carry an action camera to record your flights. And there's a nice spot for a battery strap in the middle of the frame, and if you're running a GoPro up front and a battery in the rear, you can put a second strap around the back here as well if you want to. The camera plates on this design are going to be 2 millimeters thick, and they mount in the standard AOS style with a cutout in the top plate and in the bottom plate, and then it's that universal slot design, so you can fit a DJI camera, 20mm camera in the front, or a 19mm camera, and you can fit you have either a 2 screw mounting for the DJI camera or a single screw mounting with plenty of adjustments, so you can bring the camera forward to the point where you can't see the camera plates, but they still provide the right amount of protection for the lens. So if you let me take the top plate off now, I'll show you how I've got the electronics set up inside this quad. So now that I've taken the top plate off, you can see how I've got the electronics laid out in this particular build. I've got a 20 by 20 stack in the front. This is the iFlight Success D F7 Mini Twin G stack, but you could just as easily use something like the iFlight Beast or another 25mm AIO. And then in the rear I've got the Caddx Vista, and it's mounted, as you can see, at 45 degrees. And you have the option in this rear section to mount your electronics either at 90 degrees, like the front stack here, or at 45 degrees like I've got this Vista mounted. And this should make it easier for you to find the right angle so that you can get the USB plugged in really easily to both of these stacks. You might find that for the Caddx Vista, having it at 45 degrees gives you that easiest plug-in point there. Obviously you can see there's loads of space here for having a really large VTX like the 1W VTX from HD0 or the new Avatar VTX. It's going to definitely fit in this bay. And also, if you wanted to, you could swap the whole configuration round and put the Vista up front, and then you could even use a 30mm stack in the rear as well if that's what you want to use, or a 30mm AIO. One configuration that I'm really excited about is the one that uses the DJI Air Unit. So as you can see, you can fit an Air Unit in the back of this frame really easily, and you can fit it in either with a 20 by 20 stack or a 25mm AIO. And that will allow you to record the DVR from your flights with no props in view if you're doing long range, and get that high quality footage that's recorded onto the SD card rather than the slightly lower quality footage that is transmitted over the air to the goggles. So that's what a lot of people were asking about with the UL5, and this is what I'm really happy to have been able to deliver with this LR5. In terms of the motors on this build, I would recommend something like a 2004 or a 2104 motor for these 5-inch bi-blade props, or a very light 5-inch tri-blade prop would also work well. The motors that I'm using on this build are the RC and Power 2104 motors. They're the GTS V3s in 1800 kV. And the reason that I decided to use these motors is that they're a really great size for a 5-inch bi-blade prop, like an ultralight prop, or a 5-inch tri-blade that's designed for ultralight 5-inch as well. And they have this really neat mounting system. It's an M2 mounting, so it has an M2 screw that goes through here. And the prop comes down, and then there are these two little nubs that grip the prop at the base of it. And I found this system to be so easy to swap props on and off of, and it's just a breeze compared to normal T-mount props. And the only challenge is that you do have to drill out your 1.5mm T-mount props out to 2mm with a drill bit, but to be honest, I don't find that to be much of an issue. And then once you've done that, it's just so secure when you put the prop on, and then you can just screw the flanged nut down on the top of it. So yeah, would definitely recommend this mounting system over a normal T-mount mounting. The battery that I'd recommend for this build is something like this. This is a 650 mAh 6S. So that would be if you wanted to fly freestyle with this quad. So it's a high C rating and it's going to give you good freestyle performance. If you're looking for something that's more suitable for long range, then you could certainly look at something like a lithium ion pack, maybe 4S 3000 mAh. That was going to be carried really nicely by a quad like this, and it's going to give you a much longer flight time. You should be able to get easily 15 to 20 minutes with a quad like this with that sort of battery. With this type of pack, I'm getting between 5 to 7 minutes of pretty hard freestyle. A final comment on flying freestyle with this frame. It's an ultralight frame, which means that it's pretty good for flying in parks, over grass, around trees, that sort of thing. But if you're someone who likes to fly in bandos where there's lots of really hard concrete walls and you tend to crash hard, then an ultralight frame is probably not going to be what you want. You're going to want something a bit more sturdy and durable, something more similar to an AOS 5, a full-size 5-inch. But if you're looking to do some long-range cruising and then some freestyle, light freestyle in a park type environment, then this is really going to be a frame that you're going to love to fly, I think. The final thing is to get an idea of weight. So this build, as I have it here, with the props on and a battery strap, comes in at just about 213 grams. And as I'd fly it for freestyle flying, I'd use this 6S 650 mAh battery, which would bring the weight up to about 330 grams. Now, if you're flying long range, you're probably going to be using a 4S 18650 lithium ion pack. Now, that weighs about 200 grams, so I have a 200 gram battery here. And that's going to bring the weight up to 422 grams, which honestly for a 5-inch prop is going to be perfectly acceptable for long range cruising and even light freestyle. Of course, it wouldn't be an AOS frame launch unless I took you through a black box log analysis of the frame. So let's start with the roll axis and have a look at the gyro scaled output, both the spectrograph and the frequency versus throttle. And we can see that the roll axis is very, very quiet. There's nothing really spiking up even into the orange, and we don't have any resonant modes below about 250 Hertz on this frame. So by pushing those resonant frequencies up really, really high, we can make it much, much less costly to filter out that noise, reduces the latency on the PID loop, and gives you a smoother and more responsive flight feel. We can also see in the frequency versus throttle spectrogram the motor bands. So here is the fundamental motor frequency, and here is the first harmonic of the motors. And we can see that there's just a little bit more energy at about 250 Hertz, which is equivalent to the first resonant mode of this frame. If we look now at the pitch axis, we can see that the frame is a lot more active on the pitch axis. There's a lot more vibrational energy on pitch than we saw on roll. And this is very typical of frames with a dead cat layout, and it's something that I really had to work hard to mitigate in the design. And that's why you'll see that the resonant frequencies of this frame are pushed up really high, well above 200 Hertz. In fact, the first resonant mode of the frame is up at 250 Hertz for a typical configuration. And this means that although we do have this active resonant mode, it occurs at such a high frequency that we can filter it out with minimal penalty. So that's the benefit of pushing that frequency up really high, is that we can use the dynamic notch and the RPM filters to filter it out and have a minimal penalty in terms of delay. So if you want to visualize the mode shape, the first mode is the typical mode that we often see as a primary mode in quadcopter frames, which is these diagonal motors moving up and down. Ordinarily, you would see this equally strongly on pitch and roll. But with dead cat layouts, you can see that the vibration is a lot more visible on the pitch axis. There's a second resonant mode as well, a first harmonic here, and that's up at 330 Hertz. And you can see that this is a bouncing mode with all the motors moving up and down. And again, because of the dead cat layout, this has a pitching component as well, the flight controller pitching forward and back. So we do see that more on the pitch axis than on roll. But again, by pushing the frequency up really, really high, we can filter it all out with very minimal delay. And as a result, the flight performance can be just as good as what you would expect with a frame with a TrueX layout, provided you consider very carefully what these mode shapes are going to be. Looking at the yaw axis, and there's really not much to see here, the yaw axis is very, very quiet on this frame across all the frequencies. And because the yaw axis is not a very responsive axis, the flight controller is less sensitive to noise on yaw anyway. So there's nothing that we need to worry about looking at these spectrograms. Now that we've looked at a black box log analysis of the frame, I can give you some filter recommendations for the AOS LR5. I would recommend an 80 to 110 Hz dynamic biquad filter on the D term, a dynamic mode filter with an 80 Hz minimum cutoff frequency, 110 Hz maximum cutoff frequency, with a dynamic curve of 5 and a filter type of biquad. That's going to give you really good filtering on the D term with minimal delay. For this frame, you really don't need any gyro filtering. If, however, if and only if, you are running a PID loop rate that's lower than your gyro rate, for example, you're running a 4K PID loop, but your gyro is running at 8K, then you might want to have a 1 kHz PT1 filter just for anti-aliasing. But if you're running 8K, 8K, or you've got a BMI gyro and you're running 3.2K, 3.2K, then you don't need any gyro filtering. And I would have one dynamic notch with the default settings and RPM filtering turned on. And if you do that, you're going to have really the best possible performance in terms of filter delay, but also you're going to have nice cool motors and you're not going to have any issues with oscillations, flyaways or anything like that. If PID and filter tuning isn't your thing, don't worry at all, because the AOS LR5 will fly brilliantly on stock Betaflight filters. And the only reason you would need to move to this more aggressive filter setup is if you needed even more flight performance. Hopefully, now that we've gone through the design on the bench and looked at the black box log analysis, you have all the information you need to know if the AOS LR5 is the right frame for your next build. And I hope that if you're one of the several pilots who reached out to me asking for a UL5 type frame that could hold a DJI Air Unit and had no props in view for doing long range exploration and freestyle without an action camera like a GoPro, I hope that you're happy with what I've come up with here, and I hope that this frame is going to be the frame that's right for you. If you're interested in ordering this frame now, you can do so at CNC Drones. I'll put a link to this page down in the video description, and if you want to check this frame out, you can order one to try today. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you're as excited about the AOS LR5 as I am. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the frame. If you've got any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And I really appreciate all of your feedback. That's all I have for today, but make sure you're subscribed, because next time we're going to be talking about something a little bit bigger. So if you're excited about that, I won't keep you waiting too long. See you in the next one, and in the meantime, I wish you all very happy flying.